If I could say one thing with confidence, I will say that there has never been any universal beauty standard throughout human history. Even in Western civilization, if you look at what the Romans valued. Today, we pay good money to get the hump in our nose filed down that would have given us the quintessential Roman nose. Likewise, they did not think large genitals were preferable. Rather, they saw them as barbaric and animalistic. As far as being pale or tan, that was something that was attractive really based on your gender. Likewise, it wasn't until modern times where women being extremely thin was considered something to be valued. Throughout human history, being more rotund as a woman was considered very beautiful in most cultures. And this is something you will see where secondary sex characteristics might be things that are actually valued almost as a universal beauty standard, but of course that's pretty easy to violate when you consider how many people were actually gay. What we're attracted to might be driven a bit by genetics and evolution, but this is a very vague guide to what we consider attractive. It really isn't going to give us specific tastes. Those are more likely developed through socialization and through culture. Now, Hollywood has implemented a more universal beauty standard, but this, of course, is not something that came about naturally, and I would argue that the reason we have a more universal beauty standard now is based on white supremacy and capitalism. One thing beauty has always been linked to since the rise of civilization is wealth. Beauty is a sign of class, not a sign of fertility or youth. And this is even more true today when it is something that can be bought. But we see it even in times past where people used to actually give themselves disfigurements to mimic royals who had serious diseases or disabilities just because it was associated with royalty and power. That is often what beauty and especially fashion mimics. It is a signifier of status, a signifier of wealth and power. And I'm not here to shame people for wanting sexual partners or romantic partners who are attractive. I am not saying that's wrong. I will say it is a very bad foundation to build a lifelong relationship on, but there is nothing wrong with finding certain people attractive, but it is worth interrogating why we find certain things attractive. And I think it is to our detriment that we so mindlessly follow these beauty standards, because it really does limit the amount of beauty that we're able to appreciate in this world. And that is why I'm so certain there never has been any universal beauty standard, because there is nothing you can find that one group of people find ugly that another group didn't prize at one time. And I would really prefer that people just admit they are attracted to people who are conventionally beautiful, rather than pretending like it has anything to do with fertility or science, because quite frankly, it just doesn't. The things that they're claiming to be indicators of fertility, even if that was the best way to judge a person you're going to spend your life with, whether or not you have kids, is just false. And quite frankly, most of us, when we have sex, are not trying to have children. So this argument that it's all about fertility is absurd, especially since the things that the people who claim this most claim to be attracted to aren't indicators of fertility. If you were looking for the most fertile woman, if that's all that mattered to you for some reason, in animal husbandry, that's the first thing we look for to prove fertility. Does this female have a litter? Yes, then we know that they're fertile. You would be looking for a woman who already has at least one kid, who's in her early to mid 20s, who also has a BMI around maybe 24, 25. Breast size really wouldn't matter, but hip size would. You would want wider hips. And, if you don't know if someone has a kid, you'd probably want to look for a bit of a pooch, because that would indicate that she might have been pregnant and had a kid before. And this is not what they're claiming as the height of beauty. They're looking at teens and sometimes even tweens. They like hairless women. They like very young women. They like incredibly thin women. So again, with the thinness, this is definitely not a sign of fertility. Now, fertility might go down when you're getting into obesity, especially morbid obesity. But at the BMI that most models are at, when you get down to that low of a body fat percentage, you no longer menstruate. That is the opposite of fertility. And I think a lot of this is actually molded by watching pornography and fashion and what they have been presented. This is probably what is influencing them more than anything. Really, that is where a lot of our beauty standards come from. It comes from the society we grew up in, not our evolutionary drives. And that is why beauty standards tend to vary throughout so many societies. It's pretty obvious to me that there is no universal beauty standard, and there shouldn't be. And people shouldn't be shamed for their tastes, but I think they should be questioned. And if the reason you're attracted to very young girls is because you think that they're going to be easier to control and you can get whatever you want out of them, that is a problem. That is a big problem. But my biggest point, these standards make no sense to begin with, because under evolution, it is not men that are the selective partner. It is women who are selective about who they breed with. So this idea that women have to be most concerned about our looks and fertility is absurd. The male breeding strategy, according to the way they view humanity, which is one where we just blindly follow evolution, if these men were actually engaging in the best evolutionary strategy in their viewpoints, they would be fucking everything that moves, because that is how you would ensure having as many children as possible. But of course, having as many children as possible is not actually our evolutionary goal even. It's to have successful offspring. So being a good father, being able to provide for those kids, being able to teach those kids good lessons, making sure those kids are healthy through how you raise them and giving them a safe environment, that would be important. And that's honestly what is most important in human society. We invest so much in our children. If we make good parents, and I will say that if this is how you view kids, if you just want to have the best genes for them and want to find the most beautiful partner, and you're not actually worried about being a good father and raising children who are emotionally mature and understanding and empathetic, and you'll see them as beautiful no matter what they look like, and you'll love them no matter if they're disabled or they have a genetic disorder or they can give you grandchildren or what, that would make a good parent. And that is a good sign you should be a parent, because you actually want to raise a child, not because you care about spreading your genes like some automaton, but because you actually want to do the work and care about children and like children. Because if you don't, and you don't get to what you want, there's a good chance you're going to take it out on that kid. That kid is not a doll, it is a human being, and you are responsible for it for the rest of your life. If you don't want that, you shouldn't have kids. If you're not able to accept that that kid might not be everything that you want, or even a few things that you want, you shouldn't have kids. It's obscene to me that evolutionary biology and instinct are used as some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card for morality. Just because you have an instinct to do something doesn't mean it's all right to throw morality out the window. Now, I might go into a rage when I'm driving when someone cuts me off, and there might be an instinctual reason for me doing that. I'm not going to excuse my actions if I get out of the car and beat someone up because I'm so mad, just because I have an instinctual reason for doing that. No. And the same is true for who we're attracted to and who we date. So I don't know, everyone should just chill out. Don't shame other people for what they're attracted to, but don't act like what you're attracted to is the end-all be-all of beauty. And don't try to pretend like what you're attracted to is based on genetics or evolution, because it likely isn't. And I am uncomfortable speaking like this because it is just so dehumanizing to speak as if all we are breeders, and that's the only thing of value we should see in each other. And the men who like to speak of women this way should consider that if we are to speak of humans in terms of animal husbandry, generally it is a lot easier just to harvest semen from a male as soon as he produces it and freezing it. There's no reason after you collect that sample to really keep the male alive. If they really want human value to be based on terms of breeding and animal husbandry, they should consider that men are less valuable in terms of reproduction, viewed only in those terms. And I do not view anyone in those terms, and I do not think that of men. But according to their worldview, that is their value. So they should probably consider that. Those who complain about women not selecting them should also consider that according to their very scientific and evolutionary worldview, Science is giving them the thumbs down. They're not worthy. If women don't see them as attractive sexual partners, it's not women's fault. It's their fault.